The date is February 1968. The location is a narrow, muddy artery deep within the jungle canopy of Laos, a section of the vital supply network known to the Americans as the Ho Chi Minh Trail and to the North Vietnamese as the Truong Son Strategic Supply Route. It is 2 hours past midnight. The jungle is suffocatingly humid, a thick blanket of heat that clings to the skin even in the dead of night. For the drivers of the Group 559 Transportation Unit, darkness is not an enemy. Darkness is their only shield. During the day, the sky belongs to the Americans, to the screaming F-4 Phantoms and the thunderous F-105 Thunderchief aircraft that dive from the clouds to shatter the earth. But at night, the drivers believe they own the road. A convoy of Soviet-made ZIL-157 trucks rumbles slowly through the limestone casts. They are running blackout lights, mere slits of illumination that barely reveal the rutted track ahead. The trucks are laden with ammunition, rice and medical supplies destined for the front lines in the south, where the Tet Offensive is raging. The drivers are exhausted, their nerves frayed, but they are confident. The American jets are fast, but they are blind at night. They drop flares, they make quick passes, and they leave. If you stop the truck and cut the engine, you disappear. Then, the sound begins. It is not the high-pitched shriek of a jet engine. It is not the distinct chopping rhythm of a helicopter rotor. It is a low, steady drone, a monotonous grinding hum that seems to vibrate the very air within the valley. It sounds like a commercial airliner, or perhaps a heavy cargo transport lost in the storm clouds above. The convoy commander signals a halt. Silence falls over the column of trucks, save for the ticking of cooling engines and that relentless droning noise above. It circles. It does not pass over and fade away like a bomber on a run. It lingers. The sound is constant, unchanging, shifting slightly in pitch as the invisible aircraft banks, but never leaving the airspace. It feels heavy. It feels slow. Down on the ground, the North Vietnamese regulars are confused. A slow, propeller-driven plane at this altitude is a sitting duck. It defies every rule of engagement they have learned over 3 years of relentless air war. If it is a cargo plane, why is it circling a combat zone? If it is a bomber, where are the bombs? Suddenly, the physics of the night shatter. From the black void above, a solid beam of red light erupts. It is not a laser. It is a continuous, unbroken stream of tracer fire, so dense it looks like a neon lance connecting the aircraft to the earth. It doesn't burst or pulse. It flows like liquid fire. The sound reaches them a split second later, a terrifying, ripping sound, like heavy canvas being torn by a giant's hand, overlaid with a mechanical groan that vibrates in the chest. Brrr! The lead truck disintegrates. It doesn't just explode, it is shredded. The wood, the metal, the driver, the engine block, everything is perforated by hundreds of 20mm rounds in the span of 2 seconds. The fuel tank ignites, sending a fireball rolling into the canopy. Panic takes hold. The other drivers scramble from their cabs, diving into the roadside ditches, waiting for the aircraft to pull up. Fighter jets always pull up. They dive, they release, and they climb to avoid the ground. But this machine does not pull up. The red beam shifts. It walks down the road with terrifying, robotic precision. The aircraft is executing a perfect pylon turn, banking around an invisible center point, keeping its guns locked on the convoy while flying a continuous circle. It is raining death from the side, not the front. The stream of fire acts like a scythe, sweeping back and forth, turning the convoy into a slaughterhouse. The ZIL trucks are hammered into scrap metal. Secondary explosions from the ammunition crates light up the jungle, revealing brief, flickering glimpses of the chaos. Men are screaming, running blindly into the dark, but the fire from the sky seems to anticipate them. It is relentless, it is surgical, and it is endless. This is the nightmare of the Truong Son. The Americans have introduced something that defies the logic of aerial warfare, a weapon that doesn't strike and leave, but one that stays, loiters, and hunts. Welcome to the channel. This is Cold War Impact. If you want to uncover the classified technologies and shadow wars that defined the 20th century, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Today, we are investigating the weapon that changed the definition of air superiority. Back in the jungle, the drone finally fades, moving off to find fresh prey. The silence that returns is heavy with the smell of cordite and burning rubber. In the days that follow, reports begin to filter back to the North Vietnamese High Command in Hanoi. They are fragmented, frantic, and often dismissed as hallucinations induced by battle fatigue. Soldiers speak of a dragon that breathes continuous fire. Intelligence officers read reports of entire convoys wiped out without a single crater found on the road, only vehicles that looked like they were put through a giant cheese grater. The analysts in Hanoi are baffled. They look at their radar logs. The radar signatures suggest a large, slow-moving target. The flight profile matches a C-130 Hercules, a lumbering American cargo plane used to haul troops and pallets of supplies. It is a bus with wings. It has no bomb bays. It has no hardpoints for missiles. It is unarmed, unarmored, and slow. The idea that the Americans would take a cargo transport, fly it low and slow over one of the most heavily defended anti-aircraft networks on Earth, and use it as an attack aircraft is tactically insane. It goes against every doctrine of Soviet and Chinese military advisors. A cargo plane offering its broadside to the ground is a target practice dummy, not a predator. Yet the casualty reports are undeniable. The supply throughput on the trail begins to drop. Morale among the truck drivers plummets. They are no longer afraid of the jets they can see, they are terrified of the drone they can hear. The North Vietnamese military advisors, working with Soviet liaison, begin to piece together a terrifying picture. The Americans haven't just put a gun on a plane. They have fundamentally altered the geometry of the battlefield. They have turned a transport aircraft into a flying battleship. But knowing what is out there is only the first step. The real mystery is how it works. How can a plane fly sideways and shoot straight? How can it see through the jungle canopy in pitch blackness? And most importantly, how do you kill a ghost that circles in the dark, raining fire from miles away? The North Vietnamese army realizes they are facing a technological anomaly. To stop it, they will have to change everything about how they fight. They need bigger guns, better radar, and a strategy to trap a beast that owns the night. The hunt for the Spectre has begun. By the middle of 1969, the phenomenon has a name among the North Vietnamese Logistics Corps. They call it the Thug. To the Americans, it is Spectre. But names do not capture the sheer mechanical terror inflicting the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The initial confusion has hardened into a cold, desperate anxiety. In Hanoi, Soviet military advisors are poring over the debris of destroyed convoys. What they find is disturbing. The wreckage patterns do not match standard airstrikes. In a typical bombing run, the damage is blast-focused, shattered metal radiating outward from a central crater. But these trucks look different. They look like they have been eaten by termites made of lead. A Soviet technical officer stands in a muddy depot near the Laotian border, inspecting the remains of a ZIL-157 truck. The vehicle is riddled with holes, hundreds of them varying in size. Some are small, the size of a finger. Others are gaping tears where a 20mm cannon shell impacted. The engine block is cracked in half. The tires are shredded ribbons. But the most alarming detail is the angle of entry. Standard strafing runs from fighter jets like the F-100 Super Sabre come in at a shallow angle, usually between 10 and 30 degrees. The pilot dives, shoots, and pulls up. The bullets hit the front, or the top front of the target. The holes in this truck are different. They enter from the side, but also from above, at a steep, consistent 45-degree angle, and they are distributed evenly across the entire length of the convoy. It implies that the aircraft was not diving. It implies the aircraft was hovering. This is the tactical impossibility that keeps the advisors awake at night. Fixed-wing aircraft cannot hover. Only helicopters can hover, and a helicopter cannot carry the volume of ammunition required to turn a mile-long convoy into Swiss cheese in 3 minutes. The North Vietnamese anti-aircraft gunners, veterans of battles against the most advanced US jets, are finding themselves impotent. They are equipped with 37mm and 57mm anti-aircraft guns, formidable weapons that have downed hundreds of American planes. But the AC-130 is breaking the geometry of the engagement. When a gunner tracks a jet, they calculate lead. They guess where the fast-moving plane will be in 2 seconds and fire ahead of it. It is a linear equation, but the Spectre flies in a circle. It performs what is known as a pylon turn. Imagine a cone standing on its tip on the ground. The tip is the target, the truck. The base of the cone, thousands of feet in the air, is the flight path of the AC-130. The plane flies along the rim of this imaginary base, banking inward. The guns, mounted on the left side of the fuselage, are permanently fixed facing out. As long as the pilot maintains that precise bank angle, the guns are locked on the tip of the cone. The plane is moving at 200 knots. but relative to the target, it is stationary. For the anti-aircraft gunner on the ground, this is a nightmare. The plane is constantly changing its position in the sky, moving laterally across the gunner's field of view, yet its fire is pouring into a single, stationary point. The gunners fire up, tracing lines of light into the dark, but the AC-130 pilots, communicating with their sensor operators, simply adjust the orbit. They widen the circle or tighten it, dancing around the streams of anti-aircraft fire while their own guns never stop pouring rain. And then, the weapon itself evolves. In late 1969, the reports from the trail change again. The drivers were used to the buzzsaw sound of the miniguns and the ripping sound of the 20mm Vulcan cannons. These were terrifying, but they were anti-personnel and anti-vehicle weapons. If you could get your truck into a deep enough ravine or under a rock overhang, you might survive. But suddenly, the convoys begin to suffer a new kind of violence. Survivors report a rhythmic, thumping noise from the sky. Poom, poom, poom. This is not the rapid-fire hose of the Gatling guns. These are individual, high-explosive impacts. The Americans have escalated the arms race. They have taken the 40mm Bofors cannon, a weapon designed in the 1930s, originally meant to be mounted on the decks of Navy ships to shoot down airplanes, and they have mounted it inside the cargo bay of the C-130. The physics of this modification are baffling to the enemy engineers. A 40mm cannon has significant recoil. Mounting it to fire sideways out of an aluminum airframe should tear the plane apart or throw it into an uncontrollable roll. Yet, the Americans have seemingly engineered a recoil-dampening system that allows them to snipe trucks from 8,000 feet with an artillery piece. The 40mm shells do not just shred the trucks, they smash them. A single hit blows the cab off the chassis. The North Vietnamese drivers call it the Fire Dragon. The precision is absolute. The gunship can place a 40mm shell through the roof of a moving truck, then adjust aim by 10 meters and put the next round into the support squad running for the trees. However, the greatest mystery is not the gun, it is the eye. The Truong sun is dark. The canopy is thick. The trucks run with lights off. Yet, the Spectre finds them. At first, the North Vietnamese assumed the Americans were using starlight scopes, early night vision tech that amplifies moonlight. So, the convoy started moving only on moonless nights or under heavy cloud cover. It didn't work. The Spectre still found them. Then, they assumed the Americans were spotting the exhaust plumes. The drivers tried to coast downhill with engines off. It worked briefly, but the moment they engaged the engine to climb the next hill, the sky would erupt. A rumor spreads through the transportation battalions, a superstition born of fear and observation. The drivers notice a chilling pattern. The Spectre seems to know when a spark plug fires. Intelligence reports reaching Hanoi describe a baffling capability. The American air crews seem to be looking through the trees, ignoring the camouflage, ignoring the darkness, and seeing the very heat of the machines. The word infrared is known to the Soviets, but the resolution required to distinguish a truck engine from a hot rock or a burning fire at 8,000 feet is beyond the known capacity of 1960s technology. The Soviets suspect the Americans have deployed a new class of sensor, something highly classified. They are right. The device is called Black Crow, a sensor that detects the electromagnetic pulses generated by the ignition system of a gasoline engine. The C-130 is no longer just looking for light or heat. It is listening for the heartbeat of the truck itself. The psychological toll is catastrophic. The drivers feel naked. There is no hiding. If you turn your engine on, you die. If you turn your engine off, the convoy stops, and the war effort in the south starves. By the dawn of 1970, the North Vietnamese commanders realized that passive defense is failing. Camouflage is useless. Darkness is a trap. They cannot hide from the Spectre. They have to kill it. They begin to move heavier assets down the trail. The 23mm ZSU-23 anti-aircraft guns are brought in. Plans are drawn up to deploy the SA-7 Strahler shoulder-fired heat-seeking missiles. The enemy is adapting. They believe that the C-130, for all its firepower, is still a slow, fat cargo plane. It is a bully that has never been punched back. They prepare to turn the hunter into the hunted. But they are unaware that inside the fuselage of the Spectre, the Americans are about to unveil a weapon so large, so absurdly powerful, that it belongs on a tank, not an airplane. The mystery of the Fire Dragon is about to give way to the shock of the howitzer. By 1971, the jungle floor of the Ho Chi Minh Trail has transformed into the most heavily defended airspace in the history of warfare. The North Vietnamese army is no longer running. They are digging in. They have realized that the AC-130 Spectre has a weakness. It has to see you to kill you, and to see you, it has to get close. The 20mm Vulcan cannons and the 40mm Bofors are devastating, but they have a limited effective range. To achieve the accuracy required to snipe a truck, the aircraft must fly at roughly 8,000 to 10,000 feet in a tight left-hand orbit. This predictable geometry, once the Spectre's strength, is now its liability. The North Vietnamese commanders, advised by Soviet strategists, devise a counter-strategy known as the flak trap. The concept is brutal and simple. They sacrifice a decoy. A few broken-down trucks are left exposed on a chaotic stretch of road, engines idling to trigger the Black Crow ignition sensors. Surrounding this kill box, concealed in the dense foliage of the limestone ridges, are batteries of 37mm and 57mm anti-aircraft guns. These are not the small arms of the infantry. These are heavy, radar-directed cannons capable of tearing a wing off a bomber. It is a moonless night in March. The trap is set near the Mu Jia Pass. The drone arrives. The familiar grinding hum of the AC-130 vibrates through the valley. The NVA gunners hold their fire. They wait. They watch the shadow blot out the stars. The Spectre takes the bait. It enters its pylon turn, banking left, focusing its sensors on the idling trucks. The NVA commander gives the signal. Suddenly, the jungle floor erupts. 12 heavy cannons open fire simultaneously. The sky is crisscrossed with tracer fire, a web of glowing orange death rising to meet the aircraft. It looks like a reverse lightning storm. Inside the Spectre, the world turns upside down. The crew is not invincible. They are flying in an unpressurized cargo plane, filled with thousands of pounds of high explosives. Shrapnel tears through the fuselage. The scanner, the crewman dangling his legs off the rear ramp to visually spot ground fire, screams out brake calls. For a moment, it looks like the NVA has won. The Spectre breaks its orbit. It rolls violently to the right, diving away from the tracers, spewing flares to confuse any heat-seeking missiles. The gunners on the ground cheer. They have driven off the Dragon. They have proven that if you throw enough metal into the sky, the American machine will flinch. The anti-aircraft crews begin to reload. Confident that the airspace is clear, they believe the engagement is over. But they are wrong. They have misunderstood the evolution of the machine. The Spectre does not leave the area. It climbs. It ascends to 12,000 feet, then 14,000 feet, well outside the effective accuracy of the optical anti-aircraft guns, and dangerously high for the cargo plane's unpressurized cabin. The crew dons oxygen masks. Down in the valley, the NVA gunners lose sight of the plane. The sound fades to a distant murmur. They assume it is retreating to Thailand. Then, a new sound tears the air. It is the high-velocity scream of jet engines' fast movers. 2 F-4 Phantom fighter bombers streak over the valley at 20,000 feet. The NVA ignore them. They know that at night, from that altitude, a fast-moving jet cannot see a camouflaged gun emplacement under the trees. The jets are just passing through. But the jets are not passing through. A sudden, blinding flash illuminates the darkness. A massive explosion engulfs the primary 57mm gun emplacement. Then another, then a third. The explosions are impossibly precise. The bombs are dropping through the canopy and landing directly into the dugout gun pits. There are no misses. There is no walking the bombs onto the target. It is sniper fire with 500-pound warheads. In the chaos, a Soviet advisor observing the destruction realizes the terrifying truth. The AC-130 did not run away. It went upstairs to act as the conductor. The Americans have installed a new piece of technology in the Spectre's sensor suite, a laser designator. The AC-130, circling safely in the thin air above, is using its low-light TV sensors to find the muzzle flashes of the anti-aircraft guns. Then, it fires an invisible beam of laser energy, painting the target. The F-4 Phantoms above drop paveway laser-guided bombs. The bombs glide down, searching for the reflected laser light, riding the beam directly into the lap of the enemy gunners. The thug has become a spotter. It is a force multiplier. The North Vietnamese realize they are not fighting a single aircraft, they are fighting a networked organism. If they shoot at the Spectre, it marks them for the Phantoms. If they hide from the phantoms, the Spectre comes down low to eat them with the 40mm cannon. Panic sets in. The flak trap has failed. The NVA realizes they cannot defend the road with static guns. They need to make the road itself dangerous. They need to hit the Spectre harder, faster, and from further away. They begin to deploy the Strela 2, known to the West as the SA-7 Grail. This is a man-portable, shoulder-fired, heat-seeking missile. It requires no radar, no heavy setup. A single soldier can hide in a bush, wait for the drone, and fire a supersonic missile that homes in on the hot exhaust of the C-130's engines. The introduction of the missile changes the calculus again. The AC-130 seconds are forced higher. They are forced to be more cautious. The NVA commanders breathe a sigh of relief. They have established a ceiling. If they can keep the AC-130 seconds above 10,000 feet, the gunship's 40mm shells lose their precision. The spread of the bullets becomes too wide. The convoys can survive. The NVA logic is sound. We have pushed them out of range. To hit us effectively, they need to be close. We have made it impossible for them to get close. They believe they have checkmated the Spectre. They believe physics is on their side. A gunship cannot carry a weapon big enough to be accurate from 3 miles away. The recoil would stall the plane. The weight would ground it. But in the winter of 1972, a new variation of the Spectre appears over the trail. It looks different. On the port side, protruding from the fuselage like a grim telescope, is a barrel that simply shouldn't be there. It isn't an aircraft gun, it is a field artillery piece. The North Vietnamese are about to learn that the Americans didn't decide to get closer. They decided to bring a siege weapon to the sky. The date is March 31st, 1972. The North Vietnamese army has launched the Easter Offensive. This is no longer a guerrilla war of shadows and supply trucks. This is a conventional invasion. Hundreds of Soviet-supplied T-54 tanks and PT-76 amphibious tanks are rolling across the DMZ and out of Cambodia, intending to crush the South Vietnamese forces through sheer armored weight. For the tank crews inside the T-54 seconds, there is a sense of invincibility. They know the American air power is dangerous, but they also know its limits. Fighter jets with bombs are inaccurate against moving targets. Helicopter gunships with rockets are deadly but fragile, easy to shoot down with heavy machine guns. And the dreaded AC-130 Spectre? The tank commanders have been briefed. They know the Spectre carries 20mm and 40mm guns. These weapons are devastating to soft-skinned trucks and infantry. But against the sloped, thick steel armor of a Soviet battle tank, they are ineffective. The bullets would bounce off the hull like hail on a tin roof. As long as they stay buttoned up inside their 40-ton steel fortresses, the fire dragon cannot hurt them. This confidence lasts until the night the sky coughs. A column of T-54 tanks is advancing along a highway near Unlock. The commander of the lead tank scans the darkness through his periscope. The jungle is quiet. Then, his radio crackles with a warning from a spotter unit. Spectre overhead. The commander orders the hatch closed. He isn't worried. He hears the familiar drone of the engines high above, perhaps 12,000 feet. He knows he is safe. The 40mm cannons cannot penetrate his turret armor, and at that altitude, their accuracy is diminished. He orders the column to keep moving. Then, the drone changes. The steady hum is punctuated by a sound that doesn't belong in the air. It isn't the rapid burst of a Gatling gun. It isn't the rhythmic thump-thump of the Bofors. It is a singular, earth-shaking crack. It sounds like thunder, but sharp, metallic and close. Inside the lead tank, there is no time to process the sound. One moment, the tank is a sovereign machine of war. The next, a high-explosive artillery shell, traveling at the speed of sound, impacts the top of the turret. This is not a strafing run. This is a direct hit from a 105mm howitzer. The kinetic energy transfer is catastrophic. The shell does not bounce. It detonates with enough force to shatter reinforced concrete bunkers. The 33-pound projectile turns the interior of the tank into a blast furnace. The ammunition storage cooks off. The massive turret, weighing several tons, is ripped from the chassis and tossed into the jungle like a discarded toy. The tank behind it stops. The driver is paralyzed by confusion. Was it a mine? Was it an ambush by ground artillery? They scan the tree line for the muzzle flash of an enemy field gun. There is nothing, only the dark jungle. Then the sky cracks again. Boom. The second tank disappears in a cloud of fire and steel. Panic spreads through the armored column. This is impossible. Artillery, heavy field artillery, is a ground weapon. It requires heavy recoil spades dug into the earth. It requires a crew of 5 men to load and fire. It fires in arcs from miles away, usually missing the target by 50 meters. You cannot put a field gun in the sky. You cannot fire it with sniper precision at a moving tank from 2 miles up. But the Americans have done exactly that. They have introduced the ultimate iteration of the gunship, the AC-130E, code-named Pave Aegis. They have taken the M102 105mm howitzer, a standard army field piece used to shell hilltops, and mounted it inside the cargo bay of a C-130. The sheer audacity of this engineering feat is difficult to overstate. It is, quite literally, flying artillery. To the engineers back in the United States, the idea initially seemed like madness. A 105mm howitzer generates thousands of pounds of recoil force. If you bolted it directly to the floor of an aluminum aircraft, the first shot would likely tear the airframe apart or send the plane into an unrecoverable yaw. The physics of flight do not agree with the physics of heavy artillery. To solve this, the engineers created a floating mounting system. The entire cannon is mounted on a slide. When the gun fires, the barrel and the breech recoil backward into the cargo bay, absorbing the massive kinetic kick, while hydraulic buffers slow it down before it slams into the aircraft structure. The entire plane still shudders. The pilot feels the kick in the yoke, the airframe groans, but it holds. Inside the belly of the Spectre, the scene is a chaotic ballet of violence. This is not a push-button war. It is manual labor. The pig, as the gun is affectionately known by the crews, sits near the rear of the plane. It is manned by loaders who are physically hauling 33-pound artillery shells from the racks. The aircraft is banking hard, pulling G-forces in a tight turn. The floor is tilted at 30 or 40 degrees. The loaders have to balance on the sloping deck, lift the heavy shell, ram it into the breech, and close the block, all while the plane is vibrating and the air is filled with the acrid smoke of propellant. The fire control officer, sitting in a booth forward, stares at a glowing screen. He is using a low-light television sensor and a laser rangefinder. He places a crosshair on the thermal ghost of a tank 2 miles below. "Gun ready," the loader screams over the intercom. "Fire," the officer commands. The loader yanks the lanyard. The gun roars. The breech kicks back 3 feet into the cabin. The empty brass casing, the size of a small trash can, is ejected and clatters across the metal floor. Down below, the shell flies for nearly 15 seconds. It is a long, terrifying wait. Because of the altitude and the complex ballistics of firing sideways from a moving platform, the fire control computer has to calculate wind speed, aircraft velocity, roll angle, and shell drift. But when it hits with the wrath of God. The introduction of the 105mm cannon changes the entire strategic picture of the war. The North Vietnamese army had relied on the safety ceiling. They believed that if they forced the planes up to 12,000 feet, the smaller guns would be inaccurate. But the howitzer loves altitude. The higher the plane, the more time the crew has to track the target, and the shell still arrives with lethal velocity. The Pave Aegis Spectres begin to dismantle the North Vietnamese offensive. They don't just hunt trucks anymore, they hunt armor, they hunt barges, they hunt command bunkers. There is a famous story from the Battle of An Loc. NVA troops had seized a church and were using it as a command post, confident that the Americans would not bomb a religious site for fear of collateral damage to the structure. A Spectre arrived overhead. The crew was given the coordinates. Using the pinpoint accuracy of the 105mm gun, they fired a single shell. It punched through the roof and detonated inside the sanctuary, neutralizing the command post while leaving the outer walls of the church standing. The enemy's confusion turns to a deep, abiding horror. There is no countermeasure for this. You cannot hide from a sensor that sees heat. You cannot run from a plane that matches your speed. And you cannot armor yourself against a weapon designed to level buildings. The Soviet advisors are stunned. They analyze the wreckage of the T-54 tanks. They see the impact craters on the top armor. They realize the Americans have successfully married the loiter time of a cargo plane with the firepower of a destroyer. This weapon system, born from the desperation of the Jungle War, becomes a legend. It is the only aircraft in history to mount a broadside artillery piece. It is a concept that dates back to the age of wooden sailing ships, the line of battle resurrected in the jet age. As the war in Vietnam winds down, the AC-130 does not disappear. The gunship concept was supposed to be a temporary fix, a jury-rigged experiment for a specific kind of jungle war, but the Spectre proved too valuable to retire. It evolves. The analog computers are replaced by digital fire control systems. The engines are upgraded. The sensors become sharper, moving from fuzzy green blobs to high-definition thermal imaging. In the decades that follow, the AC-130 appears over Grenada, over Panama, over Iraq, and over Afghanistan. It becomes the guardian angel of American special forces. When a Navy SEAL or an Army Ranger is pinned down in the dark, surrounded by enemies, they don't call for a jet that drops a bomb and leaves. They call for Papa Bear. They call for the Spectre. They know that somewhere in the black sky above, there is a crew of 14 men inside a converted cargo plane, orbiting a pylon in the sky. They are watching, and they are waiting to unleash a rain of lead that has no equal in the history of warfare. The mystery that began with a strange humming sound over the Ho Chi Minh Trail has been solved. It was not a monster. It was not a ghost. It was American ingenuity pushed to its most violent extreme. A flying warehouse that delivers nothing but destruction. From the terrifying zip of the miniguns to the thunderous crack of the howitzer, the AC-130 remains the ultimate predator of the night. It is a reminder that in the Cold War, the most dangerous weapon wasn't always the fastest or the sleekest. Sometimes, it was the slow, ugly plane that refused to go away.